Ooh,
So Alexis?
Thank you. Hello.
Yeah, it's a packed crowd.
I feel very formal. I don't normally dress up for conferences, but
Are
you
you
know
usually in
what?
flip-flops?
Only the best. Only the best for you all, Singapore.
And this is not your first time in Singapore.
It is not. It is not. I was here, 2004 as a junior at the University of Virginia. I was invited here by a professor of mine to compete in a technopreneurship forum that was being hosted at the National University of Singapore. And this was a really big deal for me. I had a summer internship all lined up in New York, and when my professor told me I could have 2 weeks, all expenses paid in Singapore, I was like, what internship? And immediately jumped at the chance.
Do you have to Google where, wait, was Google around back then? Do you have
Did
to
I
research?
Bing or Yahoo?
Yeah, where Singapore was back then?
No. Fortunately, I'd done a decent amount of traveling already at that point, and I would already spend most of my summers backpacking. And so it was too good to be true to actually get paid to do what I would normally do during the summer.
And so what we realized was that conference that Alexis pitched at, I ran an organization of that back then.
Yeah.
We could have met, but we didn't.
We
Wait,
could have, but
we
it
do
changed
have
my life. It really did, because that was where my first night here in Singapore, I sat down with my professor, the one who invited me, and pitched him on the company that would become Reddit. And he said, look, actually I get pitched a lot, and this is a pretty good idea. I think you should do it. And after a couple of days of hearing all these conference lessons and all these speakers come in talking about tech entrepreneurship, I was like, you know what, actually, yeah, you know what, I could. And I wrote this email. You can find it, Google it. I wrote about it in my book, and I'm slightly embarrassed because I wrote the word bro in this email probably more times than I've ever uttered it in my life. But I wrote this email to Steve, my co-founder, saying, we need to start a company. Like, I've been here in Singapore for the last week. I'm convinced we can start this, and I need your help. I can't do it alone. And so I'm grateful. I'm endlessly grateful to NUS and Singapore as a whole, because that's what jump-started my whole career.
Wait, we have a picture. We do have a picture.
This is going to get embarrassing.
We do have a picture. Can you please cue the picture?
You don't need to zoom in on that. Yeah, that's
zoom in.
That's me. That's me in the back there. Yeah, this is 2004. This was a serious face. I was matched with a team of NUS students, and we were supposed to spend the whole week or so researching this patent and then putting together a pitch and a business plan. But we realized, I guess the patent we had been given was out of date, or it just wasn't really relevant or valid. So we just hung out, and I ate my way through this entire town.
What do you mean, ate and drank your way?
Yes. I still can't get over the fact that at 2 in the morning on a weekday, y'all are still out at these night markets, and then still, first thing in the morning, everyone's out, fresh-faced and bright-eyed and bushy-tailed. I don't know when y'all sleep.
2 a.m. food includes super oily pratas.
Yeah.
Right?
It's a marvel, and I wish we had it in the States. I also had durian for the first time back then, and that has changed my life.
Okay, so
Very
Singapore
grateful
has
for that.
been monumental,
Yeah,
right?
no, I genuinely, really, this was where I decided I want to be an entrepreneur. So I'm thrilled to be back now, 13 years later, and I hope some of you all, actually all of you here, presumably want to be entrepreneurs. So
Many entrepreneurs already.
paying it forward, trying to pay it forward.
But yeah, so throughout these years, 13 years, you've done a lot. You've been a serial entrepreneur, you started your own fund, but going back, you were first rejected from Y Combinator when you first
Why you got to
pitched.
bring that up?
Failure is
Sore
good.
spot.
Failure is good.
Yeah, we got smacked in the face with failure. That same idea that I had told my professor that he said was a great idea, it was called My Mobile Menu, or and it was going to let people use their phones to skip lines. And so if you were going to order something from the Starbucks, you just a few blocks away, you'd text it, and then you'd show up and be like, hey, I'm Alexis, get your latte.
And smartphones wasn't around back then.
No, the smartest phone was like a Palm Trio. And we thought we were on the verge of something amazing. Wisely, Paul Graham and the partners at Y Combinator were like, this is way too early. This is never gonna work. This was now 2005. And they rejected us, which sucked. And then the next morning, called back. And I'll never forget, I picked up that phone, and Paul was like, I thought, oh my God, he's calling us back. They want us. And he was like, look, we still don't like your idea. It's why would you call just to say that? That's just rude. And he was like, no, hold on. we like you too. And if you and Steve are willing to change your idea and do something in a browser, not on a phone, we'll invest. And
A check for
12 grand.
Yes.
Yeah, that was
$12,000.
YC's seed funding back then was $6,000 per founder. That's all it took to basically live for a summer for 3 months in Boston. And we got off at the next stop. We were on a train back to Virginia. We got off at the next stop, went right back to Boston, sat down with Paul, and what came out of that meeting is what would become Reddit.
And today, there's 280 million people visiting Reddit monthly.
Yeah, 280 million monthly active users. According to Alexa, it is now the #4 most trafficked site in the United States.
Congrats.
Which is crazy. I don't know if any of y'all are Redditors.
Many. I'm sure
Any?
there are many, right? Who are Redditors
Anyone?
here?
2 of you. Oh, no, there we go. Upvote, upvote, upvote,
Quite
upvote.
significant,
Thank
about
you.
1/4, I think.
Thank
Yeah,
you. I
yeah,
saw
yeah.
r/Singapore was talking about this. Like, we have not even tried to internationalize. We're still just trying to focus on a lot of the fundamentals in the product. Steve, my co-founder and our amazing CEO, we both came back full time about 2 years ago, and so we've just been trying to catch up. And we didn't even have a mobile app until last year. So we've got a lot of fundamental work to do, and then we're going to eventually internationalize. But for now, just
Okay,
trying
we'll
to
get
get
back to that later. So,
Yeah.
okay, so since then, you've also been very public on many issues, including like for net neutrality. You've, through Initialize, invested in many companies. Some of them we would know. Instacart, right? Zenefits.
Yes.
Coinbase, I think.
Coinbase,
Soylent.
love that crypto. Soylent,
Yeah,
yep.
yeah. Although a lot of them are not available in Singapore. But okay, so you helped shape a large part of the online world. What gives you meaning in life?
Wow. What gives my life meaning? You know, I've generally tried to operate under a mantra that is to make the world suck less with the things that I do, which is like setting the bar just high enough. It's not quite making the world a better place. Let's just make it suck less. Like if we take a moment to acknowledge the fact, like there's a lot of things that need improvement, and I think the things that give my life meaning are either companies or nonprofits or anything that I've been able to invest time or money in to help make things suck a little less and to help people. I don't know. In my role as when I'm thinking about it as an investor, it's obviously to hopefully make money and make a return for my investors, but also to help amazing entrepreneurs get a chance to create something that makes a real difference. We sit at such an amazing time when, if you wanted to change the world during the Industrial Revolution, you had to open a factory, and today in the internet age, you need to just open a laptop. And that's powerful. That's really, really powerful. I can honestly look any of you in the eyes and say, you can create the next billion-dollar company that employs thousands or tens of thousands of people, affects lots of people, with little more than a laptop and internet and your brain. Like that's what you don't need to start with a factory or labor or lots of capital. You really just need those basic raw materials. And it's obviously not going to solve all of our problems, but it can make a tremendous impact. And I want the world to have more entrepreneurs, and I want the world to have better things, and technology and software in particular is enabling that to happen at a scale that we've never seen. And it's not exclusive to Silicon Valley, I might add. Innovation is not limited to just a zip code in Northern California. Like it happens all over the world. And while I do think, I live in San Francisco now, while I do think that it is an amazing place to come to learn from, to spend time in, it is not the only place. We started Reddit in a suburb of Boston. And I think what's so important is that it is not seen as the exclusive way to do entrepreneurship. There are many, many paths. And by all means, learn from the best lessons of the Valley, but also feel free to learn from a lot of the biggest mistakes. And don't try to replicate it here or anywhere, wherever you are. Try to take the best parts of it and then figure out what makes your location special and unique and really leverage that.
So on that, for people who also agree with your mantra of making the world suck less, what would you say in a piece of advice, how do you start and kill ideas?
I think what we have right now is a surplus of entrepreneurs who because starting a startup is now kind of like, it's like having a band. I don't know, everyone's got one, and it's cool, and that's overall I think that's a great thing.
Floppy hair, unshaven, flip-flops.
Yeah,
Maybe all that.
it's a
shebang.
vibe, and again, I'm happy entrepreneurship has become such a mainstream and popular thing. I think that's overall a good thing. Is I see so many founders who are idea rich but execution poor, and at the end of the day, your ideas don't actually matter. What matters is the execution. And so I think the best way to get good at killing ideas is to be executing on them and testing them and finding. I mean, this is all sort of startup 101, but writing code and getting users, or whatever that thing might be. It may not be writing code, but whatever it is, to make a product and test an idea as soon as possible and as often as possible. And the good news is, the market is a pretty good indicator of whether you're doing well or not. And then you can be pretty agnostic and start to keep testing multiple things. I think great founders are relentless and stubborn in their vision for how the world should be, but very pragmatic and flexible with their sort of day-to-day or week-to-week tactics. Because they see how the world is going to look, but when they encounter resistance, and every founder is going to get resistance, like no one is going to care about your startup other than your mom, and you have to convince everyone else to spend a minute of their time with what you're building. Great founders don't continue banging their head against the wall because they just insist this must be the way. They realize that there's a future that they have to convince the world to, but they're willing to change their tactics. And that's everything from refining their landing page to just totally changing the product altogether.
And for yourself, I mean, not just Reddit. Reddit is, quote unquote, the most famous startup you've built, and now obviously initialized. But along the way, you also built Hitmonk and Brad Pig, which is an uncorporation. Yeah.
Yes.
So prior to getting to those two other companies, did you iterate ideas yourself?
Yeah, well, I mean, My Mobile Menu is probably the single biggest and best failure of my tech career, because we spent a year working on a product that we didn't really properly test with a big enough market. We were in our little bubble in our little college town, just talking to restaurants, but not actually getting them to commit. And this is another common fallacy where you just assume, well, of course it's a great idea, and everyone tells you it's a good idea because no one wants to tell a founder their idea is terrible, right? It's just polite to be like, yeah, that sounds great. And even the restaurateurs we talked to were like, yeah, this is amazing, of course we'd love this. But we didn't actually get them to sign a piece of paper that said, yes, here, we want this, take our money. Or yes, we'll actually take the steps to implement it. And so we didn't actually rigorously test the idea. And so, we see this time and time again for founders, and even for me personally. And even those setbacks and even those missteps are lessons, and hopefully things that you learn from and do better on the next time.
So in a parallel universe, without all your companies, if they didn't exist,
Yes.
do you think the world how would the world be? Without Reddit, without Hitmonk, without Initialized, without you?
I wouldn't be on this stage, and people would probably get a lot more work done because they wouldn't be on Reddit all day. I do think, creativity to me is not a, I don't really believe in truly original ideas. I really think everything is a remix, and all the things I've worked on, I think even the little Snoo, our mascot from Reddit that I designed when I was bored in class my senior year at UVA, everything is a remix in some way. Everything is inspired in some way. And so if we hadn't started Reddit, I'm sure someone else would have created some next iteration of message boards. I would have been really bummed because it wasn't us, but thankfully it was.
Have you ever gotten founders who've pitched something completely out of this world to you?
Oh yes, all the time.
How did they sell the unknown?
When it's interesting because especially at the earliest stages, and we prefer to invest in the earliest possible stage companies. You really have to believe in something that is years away from coming to fruition. And so there are lots of scenarios.
Define years. Are we talking about 5, 10, 20?
Well, it depends. I'll give you an example. A company like Coinbase. Now they're basically the de facto cryptocurrency platform if you want to buy, sell, or hold Bitcoin or Ethereum or now Litecoin. But when we first met Brian, one of the founders, he had been working on anti-fraud at Airbnb. And at this point, Bitcoin was something you would read about occasionally on Hacker News and occasionally on Reddit. And I was aware of it because I was subscribed to the Bitcoin community. But it didn't yet seem like a real thing. It seemed like a toy. But this founder came to us.
Which year was this?
2009?
Yeah,
10?
that was when it kind of first started, yeah.
Google it. But this would have been 6 months before Coinbase launched. And what Brian did was he left Airbnb. At this point, Airbnb was already a $1 billion company, clearly on its way to be very successful. He left a lot behind to start something new. And when you get such a strong signal from a founder, or from a person who becomes a founder who's so well regarded, who's clearly like smart and willing to turn down pretty direct and obvious upside by staying at Airbnb for something totally new and untested, you have to pay attention. And so when he laid out his vision for how this was going to be a real thing and how there needed to be a trusted source for doing business around cryptocurrency, you had to take notice. And it was little things like the fact that he and his co-founder, Fred, were willing to actually put their names on the website that gave it legitimacy. This was at a time when it really felt like, do I really want to upload this money? Like, do I really want to trust them? For most of their competitors, Coinbase stood apart because they were willing to do things in a really above-the-board, transparent way and create the security people needed. And so, yeah, there were plenty of people that Brian met with who I'm sure thought, really, Bitcoin? Please, no, that's nonsense. It's malarkey. No one's gonna know. Are you? They probably assumed he was a con artist, and we were fortunate enough to be there at that place and at that time, and have the relationship with him to know that there was something real there.
When you say relationship, meaning it was an ongoing friendship that you kind of saw the evolution?
No, relationship in the sense that like we were like able to sit down with him. He was also in Y Combinator, and so the recommendation I think had originally either come in from his bosses at Airbnb, who were also a YC company, as well as a friend of his who was another YC founder from Sif Science, and it's that network. And I think there is this advantage you have, and this is for all of you. You have so few options, so few things in your life that you control. One of the things you do control is the network of people around you. And there's a good saying, there's a cliche about you're the average of your 5 closest friends. And it's worth it to really do an inventory of your closest friends. I mean, you don't need to put down like a spreadsheet and rank them or anything, but do an inventory of your closest friends and ask yourself, like, are these people who make me better? Are these people who I admire? Are these people who push me and challenge me and who I look up to in various ways, or not?
Alexis, so your childhood friend is here, right? John?
Yeah, John,
He's
childhood
backstage.
friend. John
So
Swires,
top 5?
right there.
Oh, there. Top 5?
Oh yeah.
You can tell me
He's
secretly.
in the top 5. Oh yeah, he knows. He knows. I know him since kindergarten, and I'm not just saying that because he's known me since kindergarten and has a ton of dirt on me. I mean, like you. And I've noticed this. I'm 30. How old am I? 34. Yeah, 34. And I've noticed this as I've gotten older, though. Like I wish it was something I had thought even more about when I was in my 20s.
In terms of especially curating that top 5?
Yeah. I mean, you don't have to limit it to 5. Okay. This is just the cliche. But really, like, think about the people you surround yourself with, because again, you have so few things in your life that you can control. This is one of them. And it has such a big impact on who you are as a person, not just as an entrepreneur. Let's set aside the entrepreneur stuff for a second, but just who you are as a person. And it's worth making that long-term investment, right? If we all believe as entrepreneurs we should be investing for the long term, when you think about your portfolio and you're like, obviously, I listen to Warren Buffett, I'm investing for the long term, right? Your relationships are one of the most important and zero-cost investments in terms of dollars that you can make. And I think about that a lot, and I've been really fortunate over the years to have learned this, I think, fairly quickly, but not quickly enough. And I think of all the best things that have happened in my life and the best things that have happened to me, not just in business, but also personally, and it's a direct result of the people I've surrounded myself with.
Can it be disingenuous, though, to approach someone that you think is high profile or someone in power that you think can be your top 5? You want that person to be your top 5.
Oh, for sure. Don't do that. Yeah, no, there's zero. I mean, and that's actually, so I think there's 2 things. So there's, I mean, believe me, all of these people I'm thinking about, right? We were all forged in the same fires because we either grew up together and were the like slightly outcasted nerds playing video games together, or we were founders together back in like that first batch of Y Combinator, right, when no one cared about startups and we were all figuring out how to be managers for the first time. These are all peers. Mentorship is a whole nother thing, and I regret to this day not having a stronger group of mentors. I'm still like actively trying to build that out, and so I think for up and coming founders, it's important to get that access. I mean, it's like you got to be realistic. If you're gonna go talk to Elon Musk, that his inbox is pretty full. But you don't need to start with Elon Musk. You can start among your peers, the people who you feel are doing interesting things, the people who you really respect because they're so dogged about learning new things and putting themselves in different and uncomfortable situations, or what have you, right? I think you're still fully capable of filling out that top 5 just with your peers.
So, but one argument there is also that there's many private clubs, quote unquote private clubs. So friends, for example, you and your friends, you hang out together, you are a private community, right? How can people penetrate that? How can people here in Southeast Asia penetrate that Bay Area, Silicon Valley kind of network?
Well, I don't think you have to. I really don't think you have to penetrate the Bay Area. I think it's certainly worth visiting. And I think most of you are probably a degree or two of separation away from someone who is active in that community. If you're here at Tech in Asia, you are connected to tech, and that's worldwide. So I think that's just a matter of getting introduction from someone you know. And of course, yeah, you can apply to Y Combinator, and I recommend you do that. The YC Fellows Program, I recommend you do that. But it's not mandatory. I think it's very easy to get seduced by the idea that this is some requisite for success, and it's not. I actually was recently reminded of the fact that Evan Spiegel, who's the founder of Snap, of course, he had applied to be in YC's startup school, which is not the program, it's just a conference that YC runs. And there's an application because, of course, there's only so much room in the building. And so they deny people, the chance to get in. And apparently Evan got rejected from it. And I guess never applied after that. And clearly did not hold him back with Snap. And so again, I want to disabuse you of any illusion that there's like some requirement or there's some, entrepreneurship is not like a paint by number. And so while we can learn a lot from the Bay Area, and I think you all will have at least a connection or two that'll get you there and get you introduced to people, it's not a requirement. And great businesses are created all over the world.
So on a slight tangent to networks and community, in your companies, for example, Reddit is the biggest one. Your company, Reddit, survival was based on the community of internet users, right? So for companies here, I've been seeing a large number of them thinking about using the word community to create engaged users for their startups, so that you can create a network effect where they keep coming back and then buy your product, right? So for such startups, what kind of how should they build and manage such a community? So
this is a shift we've watched happen over the last 10 years from the front row. And there are going to be companies that we talk about that were pre-social media and post-social media. The companies that were forged, that were created post-social media, all have a deep understanding of their brand and a strong relationship with their community. And that's because they had to. It's because if you were building a company from nothing, when only your mom cared about it, in the last 10 years, you had to earn and fight for every single customer. So you had to earn and fight and understand exactly what they wanted. You had to be there on Twitter at 3 a.m, answering their problem and supporting them. And those are the companies that are going to thrive. And they're going to drink a lot of the milkshake of the companies that were before that time, because so many of them are still struggling to adapt to this new world. And so my advice, it's about driving that kind of real engagement and understanding your users in a meaningful way. And we've actually, I've definitely been colored by the communities that I've found around companies I was deciding to invest in. So like Soylent, that was a no-brainer seed investment, even though it seemed crazy at the time, because the Soylent community on Reddit was so adamant. Like r/Soylent was millions of dollars of free marketing from authentic fans who were remixing and sharing and creating their own recipe versions of this nutritional shake, basically. And when you can see that kind of organic engagement, when you see that kind of passion, like that is priceless. And there's clearly something, there's clearly heat there. And so, my recommendation for you all is similar to what they did, which was to, one, deeply engage that community and be very transparent with them. I mean, literally to the point of just open sourcing the formula, which I think, again, a lot of pre-social brands would think would be unthinkable, was obvious because they knew it would lead to so much more in value because people actually wanted to talk about it and actually felt like they owned it. And I think the other part of it is a pretty consistent and requisite engagement. There is this, you can tell the pre and post companies apart because the pre companies think about this 24/7 water cooler as a risk. Oh my goodness, people, I can tell if people are saying things about our brand 24/7, right? I can see it now. And all the ones who've grown up with it see it as an opportunity. Oh my goodness, like all these people are talking about us, and even if they're upset, we can engage them. And we're not just addressing one person's needs, we're addressing the needs of everyone who's watching that conversation. And again, it's this pre and post thinking, but as soon as you come to embrace it, it's a tremendous asset. Because I think we all, whatever we're working on, whatever we're passionate about, right, we would have loved to have gotten into every one of those water cooler conversations years ago, and it would have been impossible, because they were literally happening around water coolers, right? Word of mouth is king, as the saying goes. And yet we were so ignorant to 99% of it because those conversations were just happening offline around dinner tables and water coolers. Now they happen online, where we can actually see them, and better, we can engage with them in real time. And I hope you all
There's such a thing as
take
too
that
much of
approach.
it, though? Too much opinion, too much diversity?
I think on the whole, the pros of it far outweigh the cons. I would much rather have an ecosystem with far more diversity. I think that's much healthier than an ecosystem with less.
Tension. So in this current climate, globally, over the last year or so, UGC platforms like Reddit, Facebook, Twitter, there's been an argument lobbied against all these platforms where, yes, you want to be a platform, a democratic platform for free speech, for everyone to voice their own opinions, but at the same time, where's that line between free speech, legality, and as a platform, where's your moral responsibility?
Well, so this is something, since Steve and I came back full-time about 2 years ago, this has become a pretty high priority. And one of the first things we did was update the content policy of Reddit to pretty clearly outline rules of the road for the platform, and then also built a trust and safety team as well as a community team to enforce those rules of the road. I think what all of us are figuring out is that this is still a pretty gray line. We are still trying to find the balance. And I think we're always going to be trying to find this balance. Internally at Reddit, there is a monthly meeting that brings together policy, trust and safety, community, and the execs, and either me or Steve as co-founders, to just review what has happened over the last month in terms of how we should be looking at and potentially tweaking or updating content policy and enforcement. So it's an evolving, constantly evolving process. And for all of our peers, I think we all just generally are trying to understand how we create platforms that are as open to as much expression as possible, while still being a place where just about anyone can feel like they can find their home there. And we know it's going to be a gray line, but we're willing to walk it because we know this is where some of the best ideas can come from.
How was your experience as a founder shaped your experience as an investor?
Ooh, I think the most important thing that an investor can do, aside from writing a check, actually more important than writing a check, is actually being helpful. And every investor talks about being helpful, but game recognized game. Founders who are sitting across the table from an investor who's never written code, who's never shipped a product, who's never built a community, who've never developed a marketing plan, who's never done any of this stuff, are going to be skeptical about the amount of value that they can add. And so I think it's vital. I'm grateful for the experience that I've had on the operating side. And I know Gary Tan, who is the managing partner at Initialized, and an amazing, awesome person. He really just, he walks the talk and has built such an amazing operating team there, where the goal is always like, how do we create the most value for companies that we invest in? How do we actually help them? And it's often the guys like Gary who don't spend their time talking on stages. It's
So
guys.
he's doing the real job, right?
Gary's doing the work. Yeah, actually, seriously, can you all tweet at Gary Tan, GaryTan? He is awesome, and I'm very privileged to consider him a great friend of mine, and also he's also on the top 5 list. But like, it's investors like Gary who are actually willing to put in the work and be there and like make the call on Saturday night at 9 p.m. to close that engineer that you've been trying to hire away from some company for 2 weeks. Like, they're the ones who are actually willing to do that work and actually do it. And the good news is that reputation, basically speaks for itself.
So what is the one thing, if a founder were to pitch to you and your team, would be a definite black check mark against him or her that you would definitely not invest? Is there one thing?
I'm trying to think what would be an immediate. I mean, if they were pitching something that were like against the laws of physics, I don't know. I don't know. I mean, aside from all the obvious stuff, like it's probably illegal or something like that. I think I'm trying to think of something more nuanced. Oh, I know. Okay, so like. A bad sign is when a founder has maybe even raised money before. Let's say they've raised some money, and they've spent a year or two not doing anything. Where they say, look, we raised $1 million a couple years ago, and now we need more. It's like, okay, well, what did you do in the last year or so with that $1 million? And when you meet so many founders who are able to build like actual working, like not just prototypes, but actually live products, and actually get users, and actually get maybe paying customers off of nothing with no funding raised. And then you meet a founder who's managed to raise funding, but not actually done anything. That's a really strong signal that they're probably just scenesters. They're probably just good at raising at least that first check, maybe the second, but they're not going to get much further because you're not going to be able to do that unless you've actually built something, actually shown something.
If a founder were to come to you and it's obvious that they're building the company just to sell, what would you say? Would you invest? The ROI and you balancing out.
They've never been that obvious. I mean, I'm trying to imagine. I
guess a similar question would also be, should startups build to sell? Along the same vein.
I think okay. If you're a startup and you're not trying to create this like legendary, multi-billion-dollar company that spans lifetimes, and you're trying to get your payday and just retire early, that's fine. That's fine. No hard feelings. But your approach should be the former. You should still be trying to build that kind of a massive, successful company, because that is actually going to be your best path to getting acquired. Because those are the companies that larger companies want to buy, right? You can look at countless examples of Yahoo trying to buy Facebook at $1 billion, and Facebook trying to buy Snap at whatever 2 or 3, right? Your best path to getting one of those early-ish acquisitions is actually to try to build a company that looks like it's on its way to be a really successful, long-term, once-in-a-lifetime type of company. So I would make sure that that's your focus as well as your pitch.
So when looking to invest in a company, in a startup, do you solve for simplicity of terms or for top-line valuation? So for example, is another 1x of liquidation preference worth another $5 million of valuation?
Ooh. We tend, because we do so much seed investing, the terms are usually pretty straightforward. I mean, these days it's usually a safe or a convertible note, and it's all fairly standard. And we're definitely not that valuation sensitive. If it's the difference between a company that's at 8 or 10 or 10 and 12 cap, we'll probably adjust the amount we invest just to get the percentage ownership. But no, it's not that big of a deal. I think it's seed is not the place to do value investing, because if this company does as well as you think it will, then it'll be worth a lot, and it doesn't really matter if you get 8 or 10 cap. And I think what's also more and more obvious is founders are getting so much better. If we, Steve and I, had applied, for instance, to Y Combinator today, the same way we did 12 years ago, we wouldn't even have gotten an interview. We would have never made it past probably the first point of vetting. Founders are so much smarter, so much further along, have developed so much more, that you all have a lot more leverage. And especially if you've got something that people want that's growing, that's something that investors are really, really hungry to invest in. And so founders, know your worth. If things are going well, you definitely use that leverage. But by that same token, don't over-optimize for valuation, because this is not the time. Your job as a founder is not to be really good at fundraising. Your job as a founder to be really great at building a company. And fundraising is not a part of building a company. So any time that you spend fundraising is time wasted that's not spent actually investing in the business. So spend as little time as possible doing it.
How should startups pick and assess markets to build companies in?
Well, ideally, it's something you're interested in. Doesn't have to be. And in fact, there's a lot, for everyone who wants to start the latest cool consumer app because they're really into events, and everyone loves events, so make an app for events. We're seeing founders have a ton of success going into B2B and really unsexy industries where, Flexport is doing freight forwarding. This is not software that a 21-year-old sitting in their dorm room is yeah, I can't wait to make freight forwarding software when I grow up. But for that very reason, it's an attractive market because one, there's no real competition. There won't be for years. Two, the incumbents, the existing software is so bad or non-existent that you're offering an immediate valuable solution that you can charge money for. And three, you have a total addressable market that is massive, that is in the billions. And there are a lot of great business ideas that are not great for venture because they're never going to get to multi-billion-dollar sizes because their market's just not that big. And that's okay, though. Those companies are going to find ways to get funded. And actually, for angel investors, it's a great opportunity because if that company is still worth tens or hundreds of millions of dollars, it's still a good return. But market size is a pretty key factor, and that's just math at the end of the day.
So for yourself, imagine if everything in your career is wiped out, now, nothing.
Oof,
okay, you're new, so you're a new entrepreneur today,
I don't have any Twitter stocks. I don't know how that could happen.
and you're $50,000.
$50,000, okay.
What will you do with that? You can survive, okay? Survival is you have food, everything provided for. 50,000 to do whatever you want.
Yeah.
What
Am I
will you
still me? Can I still
Yes. You're still you.
Okay.
Debatable without your experiences.
Because I would just ask Gary for a job. I'd be like, Gary, can I have a job again? No, I would put it all in Ethereum and then just wait, just hang out. No, I definitely get a decent amount of Ethereum, but I think it comes back to the fact that $50,000. That's more money than I had in my bank account when I started Reddit. That's for sure. And the cost of starting a company has only gone down spectacularly since. And the ability to scale and get early traction has gone up since. So I would I'd find another company to start and take that $50K and try to get enough built to raise a seed round of funding. And that's crazy, right? There are companies, someone is probably sitting here in this audience that is going to or has started a company with little more than their best friend and a couple of laptops, and in 5 years or 10 years will be worth billions of dollars and employ thousands of people and have had a material impact on the world. And that's crazy. The speed with which it can start, and the fact that it can start from such a humble beginning is just, it's a wonderful time to be an entrepreneur. And so that is what I would do.
So what are you most bullish about in the world right now?
I'm not going to say Ethereum again. What am I bullish about? I think we have all been inspired by folks like Elon, and I think that's exciting to me because we have watched everything from autonomous vehicles to Mars colonies to massive tunnels. I don't know what's going on with that one. I think it might be a way to, it's like a Mars thing, but he's doing it here first to kind of beta test it. Anyway, we've seen this stuff go from the pages of science fiction to like an actual reality, like an actual plausible, like tangible thing. And so there's a whole bunch of little boys and little girls who are like, this is a thing that we could do. Like, I can do this. And it's not crazy. We used to associate those sorts of things with, like, it was you know, only something like massive governments could start a project like putting a man on the moon. And we're seeing now individual entrepreneurs be able to start these things. And I hope that galvanizes a whole generation of entrepreneurs to try to aim for really amazing things, because this world needs really big and amazing solutions. So that's the stuff I'm excited about. I'm excited about the fact that I really feel like for all the entrepreneurs and all the nonsense.
In Singapore, we also call them, we call some entrepreneurs gruntrepreneurs.
Wait, what are they called?
Gruntrepreneurs. And you apply for grants and grants and grants.
Oh, grants on grants on grants. You see, yeah, applying for grants is not entrepreneurship. Grantrepreneurs. I see you out there. No, but I mean, don't get me wrong. I think that is a great way to bootstrap when you're covering your initial costs. But if you're spending more time applying for grants than actually building a product and improving it, there's probably you're probably better at actually applying for grants than focusing on your business. But I think we've seen, I mean, obviously Singapore's story is an amazing story of sort of thinking beyond limits and creating something out of almost nothing. I'm glad that there is this thirst for that. That I'm seeing in entrepreneurs, and that makes me really hopeful, because I know I'm not smart enough to solve a lot of these really, really hard, complex problems, but I know there are people who are, and maybe this will be the impetus for them to maybe not spend the next 7 or 8 years working on a PhD, maybe spend a few of those years and then be like, actually, let me just go build this, let me go make this, and hopefully make our lives a lot better.
Do you worry about anything? What do you worry about?
I worry about all kinds of things. Jeez, I mean, have you seen the state of things back in the U.S.? It is.
I think everyone does.
Jeez, I'm actually I'm the son. My mother was an immigrant to the U.S. She was actually undocumented for a year or two, and my father's family are all immigrants. And so after the immigration ban, it was a few months ago, I wrote an open letter that we published on Reddit. And I was so heartened. You know, I wrote this. It was the story of my family and how Reddit was only possible because of immigration in the U.S. and how obviously the American story is an immigrant story. And then I solicited stories from Redditors to talk about what immigration meant to them in the U.S. And we got thousands of people. People are still posting stories to this thread. Thousands of people telling the stories of their families and everything. And it was so moving, and it really put the magic of that pseudonymity on the platform is it lets people be their fullest and most open and authentic selves. And so we got stories that normally you only hear around intimate family dinners, but we got it shared for the world. Like 1.6 million people saw this, and I hope can start to change the perception, because we have a big gulf right now back in the States about what is best for the country, and that issue in particular was very worrying to me. Not just selfishly, because it's a key part of my own story, but also for the health of the country, and how isolationism is not a path, not a reasonable path if we want to continue to be a leader of the world. In 2017, it's not going to fly. And I also thought it was particularly interesting how even in the last few weeks, we've seen like the leadership in China talking about being a global leader and talk about pushing this and it's like, wait, what? I mean, as an American, the perspective that you're given and the perspective that you're shaped, at least growing up, was that we were the global leaders who were trying to push for a more open and connected world, and China was the opposite of that. And to see now to see that inverse as an American is a very surreal experience. And I think I'm happy to see China taking that leadership role in doing so, but it also frustrates me because this has been our secret sauce, right? The reason we've had the success as a country in the United States, the reason we've had the success for the last few hundred years is because the best and the brightest have found opportunity here that they couldn't get elsewhere, and I don't want that to change. So that's what worries me.
So I've got 2 last questions. Oh, nice.
Thank you. One person. That's okay.
One only, right?
No, but I mean,
Oh, yeah. There we
you guys,
go. There we go. A little bit.
All
better.
right, thank you. Thanks.
2 last questions. We've only got less than 18 seconds left, but I'm good to go over time. Yeah. So 2 last questions. You've done so much in your career. Is there anything else that you would like to accomplish? Is there a dream that you've yet to fulfill?
There's lots of things. I want to be an awesome dad.
Congratulations, by the way, upcoming. Yeah.
Thank you. I've got so that's September, so I got a few months left of selfishness, of relative selfishness, until then. But I want to be an awesome dad, and then I'll feel like life fulfilled. Got it. I don't know. I want to obviously continue. I want to be an awesome husband too, because I'll be married, and I don't know. Anything else really matter? I would like to be able to. I would love to be able to have the kind of legacy that folks like Bill Gates and Warren Buffett, I mean, they're not dead, but will have, because they've obviously reached the highest levels of business, and are I think their accomplishments in business will be dwarfed by their accomplishments, Bill in particular, in the nonprofit arena. And I would love, please keep using Reddit. please help me get there. But that is really that's the sort of next level legacy, and I'd love to get that too. But like I said, if I can do the husband and father thing, I'm good.
One check mark.
I'm gravy. Yeah.
So on that, I mean, you mentioned Reddit in just your last statement, but you've, again, tying it back to everything, you're here primarily because of initialized capital. You invested in many companies, this year on your 3rd fund.
And because I love Tech in Asia.
Yeah, and Singapore, right?
We've been trying to make this work for a minute.
For
I'm
2
so
years,
happy.
right?
Yes, I know. So big love to Tech in Asia. Thank you all for having me.
So very last question. Okay. Flipping the tables around, why should startups pick initialized capital as an investor?
Because Gary Tan.
Come on.
That's all I have to say. No, but all right, I mean, seriously, I hope you're all are tweeting at Gary Tan right now. This is going to be so great. He's here. He's in a meeting doing real work, but I want him to open his phone and see all these people on Twitter who are giving him some love. Because there's a shocking, it's shocking how much or how different it is to be so focused on just helping the founders. And this is something that YC did so well. At the time, Y Combinator was ostensibly no different from any of the other incubators. Everyone just thought, oh, you guys are an incubator. Got it, check. What they didn't realize was Paul and Jessica had a vision for, 1, using software to scale their abilities to help founders, and then 2, for being willing to actually do the work and not just give you an office space and some free coffee, but actually do regular office hours with you to guide you and advise you. And we've learned from the best, and the model is basically that: software and real work, real help, just at the later stage at seed and Series A. It's not rocket science. It's just work.
So how can I get in touch with Initialized?
Oh yeah, so there's actually a page if you want to pitch your startup. If you go to apply.initialize.com/techinasia. Then use the code Tech in Asia, just for y'all. Made this little thing.
It's a special thing, huh?
And
well
then just apply. Yeah, shout out to Jen who whipped this all together.
I see
She's
people
our
looking down their phones
partner.
now, recording the URL.
Yeah.
But okay.
So please do that. And then also again, please tweet at Gary Tan. Thank you so much.
I think they will fulfill your request, yeah?
Yeah.
So thank you so much, Alexis. Thanks for your time.
You.
Thank you everyone for listening.